Morning, Joe. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Lou. How about
Just
yourself?
realized while I was unmuted, my speaker volume was off, so that's a problem.
Oh,
Not mine's
I hear
good
you.
now.
I can hear you fine.
Good morning, Lou.
Jamie, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Very good. Rep
morning,
Carson, how you doing today?
Good morning.
Warren, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Lou. Am I on here twice?
Yes.
I don't know why. I don't know how that happens.
Lauren, did you forward someone? Did you
You're
use
actually
the
on here
link?
3 times.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, I'm gonna hang up. Figure out what to do.
Well, no, you don't have to hang up. It's
Lauren, I
it's
think
the
you
link.
sent your panelist link to.
Oh, that's a good point. I sent it to Trudy. That's correct.
I got it.
Right.
I'm
So
on.
she's coming on as me. That's exact. I forget that happens that way. I'm sorry.
Oh, do you
So
want
looks
me
like-
to hang up?
So what,
Carlos, can
the
you?
link was specific for me and I forget that aspect.
The 2 links that are on as, what's that, Tom?
We can address it without anybody signing off. Lauren, I'll keep you on, and then the redundants, I'll move over to the attendees list.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Lauren, I also sent it to somebody else in our office, so he may be coming on with that
They're
link.
gonna move you guys over. They'll take care of that.
Will he be able to get on or not?
Well, there's another person on already. So there's 2 people with my name. So
Oh, hey, Terry, is that you?
Carlos, can we start the meeting, please?
Yes. Jamie Bova,
Here?
Lynn Underwood Segley,
Here.
Elizabeth Fuerte,
Here.
Jean Marie, or I'm sorry, Kate Leonard. Okay, Charlie Holder,
Here.
Angela McCalla,
Here.
Jean Marie Napolitano.
Here,
We have a quorum present, Madam Chair.
thank you. Let's see. I'd like to welcome our state legislators for a conversation regarding some expectations for the coming year from the state and perhaps some impacts to our community. Today we have with us state legislators, Senator Dawn Oyer, Senator Lou DePalma, I believe Representative Marvin Abney and Representative Lauren Carson.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see who we have. Hi, Dawn. I'd like to offer, hi, Lauren. Would like to offer you coffee, but you had to bring your own.
good morning.
Good
Okay. Are we missing Catherine Leonard? Okay, well, we'll just have to move forward and hopefully she joins us. First and foremost, there were a number of questions that have come up from the council, and I'd like to give the council the opportunity to ask the legislators those questions, whether you ask an individual or all of them. I'm certain they can shed some light on whatever you're asking. So why don't we, if you don't mind, why don't we begin with Councilor McCalla?
Jean, do you want to follow the agenda or you want to jump to number 2? It's Joe.
I didn't get the latest. Number 2,
Well,
you mean?
Well, the council concerns were in number 2. The first agenda item was, and I think we have in the past heard from the state legislatures regarding the state of the state, the non-existent FY22 budget, and any issues about the revenue conference and any local impacts to the community. And then we have launched into council questions. I'm just iterating what the agenda says.
Well, then why don't we do that first? Because that would be helpful as a kind of a platform for us to see where the other items may fit in. So, Joe, were you taking that portion of it?
Well, I was going to turn it over to the legislators to tell us what's going on in the state of the state.
Okay.
I know it's difficult with regard to the lack of a state budget that is, I guess it's due March 11th. At least I saw an email to that effect. But can you give us some insight onto a crystal ball insight, I guess, as to what's anticipated and maybe reflect on the revenue conference that I believe you've already had, and tell us what you anticipate as a deficit and any impacts to a local community like Newport that you would envision. I know that the RIPEC did a summary in January 2021, which I think is probably already outdated maybe in some respects, but making some recommendations. But if you could talk a little bit about the state of the state and then the fiscal effects, not only from last year and this year, that would be helpful to give us some insight as to where we're going with our own budget, for example, and economy.
Can we start with Senator Oyer, please?
Sure. Well, I'm actually going to defer to Senator De Palma on this since he serves on the Finance Committee in the Senate and will have more updated information.
Okay, thank you. Senator De Palma?
So I will, but in all due respect, Chairman Abney probably has the hostess.
Here we go.
I will jump right in. I don't want to, he's my senior by many ways. No. All kidding aside, no. Chairman Abney, I have some updates I'll provide, but with all due respect, Chairman Abney is head of the budget on the finance side on the House. Let me defer to him, and I certainly have some input I want to provide, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Senator Abney, please don't pass it off to Rep. Lauren.
Okay. I think I'm on. Can you guys hear me well now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Great. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Don. And thanks, Lauren. I'll just do it from a 30,000 foot perspective, because right now, as Joe said, it's very, very difficult to be precise on something because we really have no budget at this point that we would have had about this time last year to be able to work with. So I can tell you that, because I think the question on the sheet was the 2022 budget. It's definitely going to be a challenging year. It doesn't mean that we're not going to get our job done, because we do every single year. But it is going to be very challenging because, as Lou, Don, and Lauren know, a lot of the plugging holes have been done with one-term money. COVID has just turned this, not just Rhode Island, but all states upside down in terms of being able to project precisely what will happen. And last year we used a lot of one-term money to plug holes because we have to balance the budget. We're not like the federal government where we can just, write a check. And this year, I don't see there's going to be that much different. That we will be using some revenues that we do get to balance the budget, but it's just going to be one-time stuff. And so when we create programs that go out into the later years, we begin to create a structural deficit. I can say that the revenues that hopefully that we will be looking for, and Lou can talk to that, he's a statistician on that, but the revenues have really got to recover well beyond our expectations to keep us from having to go into things like you hear people say, well, we have to look at all options. And what that means is taxes or cutting fee, adding fees, things of that sort, just to get it done. But again, be careful. This is not gospel, but it is what you have to do to balance the budget. Excuse me. From my vantage point, the big buckets, the three big buckets that I really take a look at is school and local aid. And just last night at about 7 o'clock, I sent a communique up to Washington, D.C. I also chair the Budget and Revenue Committee for the National Council of State Legislators. And we put together some information from each state about what's really important to them to get that up so that in the new package, because they're still working on it, that will be considered. But school and local aid were big parts of that, because just like you, if you don't get help from us, the state, then you have to go through the same thing we do, is to look at all options for assets. Well, the other big bucket that I look at, and I know that the senators are on that, that's the social services and the safety nets. The state, regardless of what we do, we still have to take care of the funds that we need for our social services and our safety net programs, because as you know, Rhode Island has a high percentage of people who are on a safety net program, so we have to do that. Then I'm looking at government operations as the third big bucket from my perspective. And that is, people forget that we have to pay for courts and prisons and parks, our public safety, revenue collection, business regulations. There are a number of things that, irrespective of all of the things that all of us know, all four of us know, we're going to be getting people asking us for everything, and they should. But those are things we really have to be sure that we take a look at and be able to pay for. So you didn't hear me put any numbers to anything because we don't have the budget to look at just yet. When we get it, we'll be able to do that. But you can take your best guesstimate. Even on the last revenue conference, we really don't know what the numbers are going to be until we see what package comes out of the federal government. And I do think that there will be one. And I do think that it will be one that will help us as cities and towns in this state to have some, again, one-time money to do some things. So I'll just be very careful about that. So the state of the state is not bad. The only other thing I would add is that because leadership is in flux, it's very difficult to know exactly what the perspective of the executive branch is going to be. I'll be meeting with Lieutenant Governor, prospective governor, I believe on Tuesday, myself and the Senate chairperson, to get an idea about what he wants to do and then how he understands how we work. So we're really in a state of flux. So if anybody gives you any specific numbers and telling you this is exactly what's going to happen, I would take it with a grain of salt until we actually get into what the numbers really are going to be when we see what this package is going to look like. But I know Senator DePalma works a lot on the Senate's Finance Committee, so he can give a perspective from that. My perspective was from the House, because it's our responsibility to work with the Senate, but at the end of the day, we have to put this thing together. But Lou and Don do a great job of making sure that I know that Newport is represented. So Lou, if I missed something and you want to put some numbers to it, please go ahead.
Can I just ask a question? Rep. Abney, are you saying that you're looking at the stimulus program that is now being either negotiated or promoted to perhaps, fill in those gaps with schools, local aid, state aid?
Yeah, I'm saying
that.
Yeah, that is a big option of what we are looking at, because without that, If we don't have that, then we have to take some pretty austere measures. But yes,
Got
we're
it.
looking at that. So are all of the other states in the
Sure.
country. That's what I was saying. We're sending a message to DC that these are the 3 or 4 big things we need to do because city and town budgets are under stress. Everybody knows that. We have to keep our maintenance of effort for schools and things of that sort. So the answer is yes, we're looking for that, and hopefully it will come. And it should at about the same time that we sort out our government here in Rhode Island. So it's not a dire projection, but I would just be very careful right now until we know what those numbers are going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Chairman, well done. From a Senate perspective, just an additional perspective of what the chairman was able to articulate. And Joe, you mentioned the RIPEC report, and it said we had about $500 million gap to fill. Take all of that with a grain of salt. It's an estimate based on a point in time. And not that it's wrong, but it's an estimate based on a point in time. If we factor into what's passed in December by the federal government as it relates to a couple things. One is the enhanced FMAP, meaning the federal match for Medicaid. So additional 6.25% to what we already get now, which is the neighborhood of about 52%, roughly. So think about that. Every dollar we spend on Medicaid, every dollar of cost on Medicaid, the federal government gives us 52 cents. They're giving us an additional 6.25 cents. And that's the same thing we got during the pandemic last year. What does that mean? That's $75 million that will come to Rhode Island because of that FMAP that general revenues would have had to pay for before. That's taken care of. Another piece that's coming from the money passed in December, was with regards to FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Their reimbursement was 75%. So if the state spent $1 of FEMA money, we were going to get $1 that was a FEMA appropriate. They were going to give us 75%. We'd pay 25 cents. They basically said, and I think the language is correct when I looked at it, that came out. In fact, it's 100% if it's related to the National Guard. So I think that's another 25 million. So when RIPEC says 500 million, we already shaved 20% of that off and we're down to 400. But don't use the number 400 as a number of, we got to go fill that. As the chairman indicated, that can go up and down, and it's going to go up and down based on revenues, based on stimulus that's provided by, and how we fill it will determine many ways. But the expectation in many of us, and as the chairman indicates, across the country, we're expecting this stimulus package. And I think President Biden was very articulate and very comprehensive in his words, saying that we need to ensure we help states and municipalities. So we're expecting, I'm expecting, you can say, well, glad you're expecting, we'll see what's in it. But I expect we're going to see if they pass the $1.9 trillion package, which is sorely needed, that the cities and municipalities and states will participate in the recovery there. The other piece that we have to take into account, and we looked at, and as the chairman indicates, about a couple of calls with whether it's NCSL revenue or Council on State Governments revenue, some of the things with the Pew Charitable Trust. If we saw what happened over the last N number of months, the stimulus that was passed, the coronavirus relief funds and the CARES Act passed 8 or 9 months ago, from the stimulus did its job. If we look at what it provided to the state, where the bathtub of revenue or the decline could have been much greater, and in fact it wasn't, because the money actually did what it did, and we're expecting the same thing can't guarantee it will happen in this next round of stimulus as it comes out. The challenge, I think, for Newport and some of the other cities and towns that I represent clearly is in the area of tourism, hotel tax, meal tax. So I'm not going to go through the numbers here. I sent it off this morning, and what's different this year, as the chairman indicates, normally the sheet that we would have provided in the past would have been based on the FY budget. Well, guess what? We don't have one. So it's based on some projections, but it looks like from an education aid, Newport should get increased education aid. Housing aid goes down a little bit because of the numbers going down over time. But really the big hit, as I said, take all those numbers as potential. That's why I put it in caps in the email that I sent. But the sheet is available. its latest projections and thinking from the Senate Fiscal Office on it. Pilot is still there. We'll see where Pilot goes, and we're finally able to get the information about what's captured in Newport Pilot, how the pilot's done across the state. So I'll summarize with Newport's front and center in our deliberations. The input and what happens at the federal level is critical. And then we have to see what happens as it relates to the overall budget FY22. And as the chairman indicates, his meeting with the governor in transition, I guess I'll call him, Governor McKee, and what he's looking to do for the March 11th budget going forward. So if there's moving parts, there's clearly moving parts in this, and we're not even certain what the parts are. So.
Thank you, Senator DePalma. Would either Senator Oyer or Rep. Carson like to add any comments to that? Senator Oyer first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, I think both Chair Abney and Senator DePalma did a really great job at kind of outlining the unknowns. And I think, I will say that, we will continue to do our best to get you the information as we have it. And I would anticipate that Lou will have a updated fiscal spreadsheet for you as soon as we see a new budget come out in March. But, as always, I think this is an ongoing conversation. And I think all of us were very sensitive to the, to the challenges that you all faced with regard to, some of the budget at the end of last year and some of the uncertainty with the flow, the cash flow as that came out. So we all, we're very much advocating for Newport and for all of the cities and towns, because we do recognize what a challenge this has been on your budget as well as the state budget. So I just think it's really important for us to continue to work together to make sure that we're advocating on the federal level to get the stimulus that we need. And then that, you guys continue to make sure that we are all aware of where you're facing challenges so that we can do what we need to do for you at the State House.
Thank you. I believe that our manager has a question. Mr. Nicholson?
I'm glad that when you raise your hand now, it appears on your screen. Nice tweak by Zoom, I guess. Yeah, I had 3 points, if I may. How certain are you that the governor is going to promulgate a budget on or around March 11th? That's number one. Number two is, last year, I thought the summary that you provided, that I provided to the council, of the salient points that someone provided, I think you did, Lou, of the salient points of the governor's budget that would otherwise affect municipalities was extremely helpful to us and all of us, not only the city administration, but the council, understanding impacts of the governor's budget on the municipality. And then the other, I'm glad that you mentioned that, don't take stock in a lot of the things you read about deficits and things like that. But I know that the IHS Markets FY 2022 projections depicted that the Rhode Island economy losing steam. So that's a big concern of ours, I think, on a local level when you relate it to tourism. And it projects a sluggish rebound, going forward. But and I think that's a very helpful report. But I can download that, I think, and provide it to the council. But it's really those two questions, because the March 11th date, like last year's budget, was tight. You anticipate us, considering there's a transition, it even happening, and then if we could get the same summation at some time, that would be wonderful, because it was extremely helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Rep. Carson?
Thank you, Jean.
I don't think my question got answered, though.
I guess
I'm
going
sorry.
past, the only thing that I can say is that I'll just sort of generally summarize what's been said. I mean, we're all in the same boat, right? We have transition at the federal government, transition at the municipal government, state government. We still have the pandemic raging. The economy is still not bound back, and we don't know when that will happen. There are so many variables that we have. We won't see the budget for another month. We have a new governor putting it together. it's clearly very difficult times. I mean, I agree with Marv and what my colleagues have said. We just need to be really stay in close touch with each other and really monitor the situation as closely as possible, because I think a lot of information is going to come out in March and April, and we're going to be really busy then trying to put a budget together. So I think those are sort of that's the key time frame to really start watching what's happening. The federal proposal is supposed to pass in March. Our budget will come out in March, and we should know by the 1st or 10th of April exactly what the status is. So, I would suggest that we just stay in close touch and watch the numbers and continue working on, advocating for support to our small businesses so they can thrive. And that's another discussion. I realize that, but, that really is key to Newport, particularly given the industries we have in the city.
Thank you, Rep. Back to the city manager. Could you just summarize your questions and direct them to either senators or reps or everyone?
I think I remember at least a couple of the questions. And
Well, Gene knows I'm not any good at summarizing, but go ahead, Lou.
I'll do the second one. I'll leave the first one for Chairman Abney regarding the dates, since he'll be meeting with the governor in transition. Joe, with regards to the summary, absolutely. I did provide one this morning. I know it may have come late because I would typically hand it out at the meeting, but that just gives a projection. So like I said, it's some thinking with regards to some things as regarding education aid and some other stuff. But we will certainly, as soon as the budget comes out, one of the first things we ask for is in fact that, because I try and get that for all the cities and towns that want it. But we'll have that for you to give you guidance on that information. So Chairman, over to you about the date.
Yeah, thanks. I have to remain optimistic that we're going to have it, Joe, by that time. Again, the caveat is that who knows, but I'm very optimistic. You got to remember that it's not just a change of executives. It's either keeping the same people that were doing the same jobs before, because they've got the same people. A governor just doesn't come up with the budget by him or herself. They've got their own fiscal analysts and things like we do. So as long as those people stay, stay there at this point and are kept up to date, I'm pretty optimistic that at some, early date in March, we'll have what we need. But that's going to be my sermon on Tuesday, to the group that we meet, that we have to have this, because if we don't, we end up in the same situations we did last year, having to make adjustments that none of us wanted to make, but we did. So I'm pretty optimistic that's going to happen. And I know, because I remember last year, you did a great job of at least keeping me abreast of, I need this right now, Marv, and so I get that, but I'm optimistic that we'll have it by then. And then we can make some pretty good projections. Yeah.
Mayor, one additional point, Mayor. Having worked with the Governor Transition McKee pretty closely over the last 8 or 9 months on the small business stuff he's been doing, et cetera, if there's any word you hear from him more than any else, is municipalities. So I think you can have confidence that he comes from municipality. He knows about local issues and challenges or whatever. No one can categorically say what's going to happen or not going to happen, but he values, understands, appreciates municipalities. And I think you hear that word more than anything else, and you see some of the folks involved with this transition are in fact mayors and other council folks involved in some of that. So I think you're clearly going to see him with a focus on municipalities. So everything that's done will be in a lens that looks through how this will affect municipalities going forward. So.
And if I may, Lou, real quick, Madam Mayor, is that as I say each year at these forums, we do our best to represent, Newport, Middletown that we can, but we really need the help and support, as we do get, of the council, who really represents the neighborhoods that we do. Because once it leaves your area and gets to us, you got to remember there's 39 cities and other towns, and God knows how many neighborhoods that are vying for the same resources. So the tighter we can keep our group, and the bigger the number that we get from, on the resolutions, it helps us. And as Lou said, a lot of what we do is we're trying to use federal resources to be able to then use our general resources for the things I know our citizen states need. And that's a big part of the formula. But I just wanted to say, I know Lou does a good job on putting on his sheet that he puts out, but it's very helpful for the advocacy to come from the council as tight a knit as you possibly can. You're never going to get 100% of the time, but that helps us argue on the floor there.
Okay, thank you. City Manager, does that answer your questions in regard to what you had for the state budget?
Oh, sure, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll share the RIPEC report with the council as well as any other information that is directly forwarded to me. There is some information, some summations, and the summation that I was referring to, I'm not sure whether I received it from the legislature or now a reflection, maybe the League of Cities and Towns, but it was an excellent summation. And I'll share that with you when it exists. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we go to the questions from the council? Again, Councilor McCalla, would you like to start, please?
Sure. Thank you all for today, gathering. I always look forward to hearing from all of you. My question really resides with maybe an update that you guys could provide in regards to vaccination and also any updates in regards to the bridge realignment.
If you just want to raise your hand, okay, Senator Oyer. I was demoting you.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so the vaccination question is, the $1 million question right now. I mean, the good news is that people are clamoring for the vaccine, and I know that there was concerns in the public health sector that there would be a great deal of refusals of people taking the vaccine. So while it doesn't feel good to be a person who really wants the vaccine and have to be waiting for it, I think that we need to also, take that as a good sign that people are looking to get vaccinated, because that's going to be a very important part of us getting through this pandemic. I think that one of the biggest things is a frustration that a lot of people had, that I've heard a lot from people about, when can they sign up? People want to be able to sign up. And I think, there's a lot of stuff that's going on logistically behind the scenes to be able to set up for mass vaccination sites that will be run by the state, similarly to the state testing programs. The reality is we don't have the volume of vaccine to be able to open up registration for those sites. So I know one of the things I hear from people is, why can't I go and sign up for an appointment? Well, we don't want people to sign up for an appointment that then has to get canceled because we don't have the vaccine. The thing to remember too is that the new Biden administration is utilizing the Defense Production Act to manufacture the vaccine. And so while that's not an overnight switch, they can't suddenly start, exponentially increasing the production overnight. We will start to very soon start seeing like an increase and more consistency in the volume of doses that get distributed around the country. So, so I think the biggest message right now is to really, continue to practice the social distancing, hand washing, wearing masks. And then, there's going to be continuing every week. There's going to be more information rolling out as far as vaccine availability. So, and I know I anticipate everyone has been watching the governor's press conferences and definitely states, the Department of Health are giving their weekly press briefings as well. So, and I know I saw Lauren had something she wanted to add.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, John. I just wanted to get online. Well, again, this is another issue that's fallen prey to a transition. And I think that, President Biden has been working the past 2 weeks to try to institute a distribution plan to the states. And I think there was a surge, like the end of last week, there was a surge where there was a lot of information that came out. I think that, we're still in phase 1. based on the supply that we're getting, the way the Department of Health has prioritized the vaccinations, we're still looking at those folks that work in the medical community and the first responders and the congregate living situations. They're starting to prepare to distribute to the over 75s. We get a mailing from the Department of Health every Friday. I don't know if you folks get that mailing. I just
We
forwarded
get
it
it.
to Kate this
We
morning.
get it.
And so that's pretty much, you know, the latest right out of the Department of Health. And I think it's going to flow very quickly. I think that once the gates sort of open up a little bit more, I think the key is communication. And I think it was great that the city put that website together, because then I could refer people to Carmela and to that website. I signed up. I also signed up to volunteer and haven't heard yet. So I'm available to volunteer to distribute and do whatever needs to be done. And I think that we just need to really stay in close communication. That way we're not giving out contradictory information to folks, particularly the over 65 people who are really most concerned at this stage. I think they're the most vulnerable in the community. And, you know, they see that in other states, their peers are getting vaccinated and they don't understand why that is. That's been a big question. You know, the states have been handling it differently and the supply has been different from state to state. So my response has been, we're still in phase 1. We're moving to phase 2 in the next few weeks, and it's all based upon supply.
Okay, thank you. Senator DePalma?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple additional pieces. As Senator Oyer indicated, and this came out yesterday from the Biden, the CDC director, that via the Defense Production Act, filtration and filling units are being be provided or facilitated to Pfizer. So it isn't an overnight switch. It's not a binary. It didn't happen before. It happens now, but it allowed them to ramp up to the millions of doses that we need. I'll be a little less kind on the state based on conversations I'm sure all of us have had. I think we're going to be doing an oversight hearing at some point on the vaccination process, because up until this week, up until really last week, if you tried to find out the schedule of who was going to be vaccinated when, all you got was, here's the list of people in this phase. Well, that's unsatisfying to anybody. I know I've gotten calls, all of us are getting calls from constituents about, I'm 75 or I'm 69. I have three conditions. I have 2 parents, and I got a call from a constituent. Parent is 92 and 96. Mom has a stroke. They have people with that person around the clock. So what we finally been able to get in pushing on Department of Health is what I'll call a master phasing schedule to show over time, with actual dates in weeks. Isn't that a great thing to have? Just to what you could expect. No, it's not exact. Know that doses may go up and down on a per week basis. For instance, a few weeks ago, when they first opened up vaccines for 75 and older, one of the communities I represent was expected to get 34. They had 34 doses and they got 17. That's little comp. 17, 34. And somebody said, well, why so few? And Newport, I think, maybe got 100. Well, they allocated that across the state. What we need from the state is a more detailed plan, because based on everyone who got their first dose, we know when they're getting their second dose, because it's either 21 days or 28 days. So just know that we're pushing on the state to get that information out. We need to be more consistent on the information as it flows. And the other piece that we pushed on when we first saw that CVS was going to have 4 sites in the state, and 3 were Woonsocket, East Greenwich, and Westerly, I think. We made a push to say, well, I think the East Bay is still part of Rhode Island, last time we checked. And how about Aquidneck Island? So in fact, CVS in Newport, CVS in Warren, I reached out to the folks at CVS, trying to find out the contact folks for the folks at Walgreens. Because at the end of the day, when we just talked about economics will only change when everybody gets vaccinated. We shouldn't expect anything to change until the entire populace who want the vaccine, and hoping everybody will, but that's their choice, gets vaccinated and moves forward. So I think that's the update. More to come. We have a lot of work to do as a state, but that we're doing vaccines is a big deal. So.
Okay, yes, I believe there's a question from Councilor Leonard.
Yeah. I want to talk about the vaccines a little more. We got an email today from the governor's office that they have, and they use, I can't remember the exact word, 100,000 doses. So then I can tell you that the staff in Newport and a lot of us have really tried to keep the population aware of where the vaccines will be available and so forth. CVS opened the portal today. By 8:30, it was filled for those getting vaccines. So if in fact we got or have like 100,000 doses in the state, my question is, why do a lot of these municipalities, why are they getting only like 17 doses? Or why are they only getting 100 doses? And yet we don't take by municipality, and this may be, I don't know, a federal state organizational issue. But in Newport, there were different segments of the population that vaccine was made available. So for the city, everybody said, if you're 75 or over, sign up. So that's what the city used for criteria. I know that the feds, and I'm not begrudging this to anybody, the feds gave doses that were separate than the general population to the housing authority. And they were told age 65 or older, because people called me and told me they got the vaccines. So it seems to me we don't have a standard criteria, or the supply is segmented for different areas, different towns, different populations. But I think that's an organizational issue with the feds, with the state. It just doesn't seem consistent to me.
Okay, with regards to the, let's talk about the 100 and the 17 that I talked about before. From talking with the Department of Health when that first happened, those were, I think, 5,000 or plus, don't quote me on the exact number, that week, because of the phase that they were in of who they were vaccinating and that what's the priorities that week or whatever, there were 5,000 doses that became available. They were potentially targeted for something else, and they said, let's start getting these out to the cities and towns, and they approached them based on, I don't know the exact criteria. I should, but I don't. But that's how they, like I said, in the case of Little Compton, supposed to get 34, they got 17. I suspect Newport would have gotten more, they got 100. You're right on. So that was because there was some excess left over from a prior week. With regards to the housing authorities, we have two parallel systems going on. I don't understand it, because the feds are doing one, and that's separate.
That's what I mean. The state's doing one, the feds are doing one.
But we can all, I always say to folks, address and control what we can. We can control the state. We can't control what's happening at the federal level. We can have insight to them and let them know that, but we got to address the state. So, but that's the piece with regards to those numbers, why there's some different criteria. And the other piece, every state has different criteria. Why? I don't know. I'm not going to prejudge one against the other, because I'm not an epidemiologist.
Yeah, me either.
But
I question that. And then in regards to the budget that we just discussed, state budget, I know everybody's working hard to fill the gaps and try to increase revenues wherever we can, and to try to make Rhode Island as whole as we can, because unemployment's the key and health comes even before that. But all the talk I hear and all the news I watch, everybody's talking about filling revenue gaps with stimulus money, which I understand totally. But then I say to myself, and I think a lot of people are saying, well, the government, the feds keep printing paper and they're giving monies to states and cities and towns to try to make us whole. But at the same time, there's a big worry that generations to come are going to carry this debt that will be in the trillions. And I know you're all aware of that. You all have the same thoughts on it. But I think we're in a very unstable, precarious position today due to COVID and what's happened. So I thank everybody for working, and I know everybody's doing what he or she can do. But that still hangs over a lot of people's heads. And I think the federal people who represent us in Rhode Island need to be aware that that's sitting on people's shoulders for generations to come. I mean, we all know it. People just don't talk about it.
I actually have a question. Maybe my colleagues can answer it. That 100,000 number on the vaccinations, does that include second vaccinations or is it 100,000 individual people?
It didn't say, it just said 100,000
I thought it
vaccinations.
might include the second vaccinations, which means that fewer people have actually been vaccinated. And I think Lou is right. Sometimes when there's a site where there's vaccinations that are being given out, there's excess and they try to move it around. And don't forget, it needs to be refrigerated. So there's logistical issues associated with maximizing whatever vaccine you have on hand.
And Kate, one other piece, and I've respectfully had the conversation, I don't say, this conversation's been, I've talked about this with the Department of Health. I don't want to say I had it with them. No, I've discussed the topic with them is the information needs to be a little clearer. Because when you look at it,
exactly,
you can't look at that number, you got to combine these two numbers. It's like, well, let's just make it clear for folks. I know we want to try and be complete, but
you're absolutely right.
Rep. Carson
Make it
says
clear.
the numbers are,
It's like a show.
I'm not giving it a reason or excuse. We need to make them clearer, and part of our job is to figure out how to do that.
I think everybody would like to know how they prioritize cities and towns and different
I think they're
programs.
prioritizing cities and towns based on how many episodes of
Many
COVID. there are.
cases. Yeah, I understand that.
I think they said the third ward in Newport is last, I think.
Yeah, they probably are.
Just kidding, just kidding.
Wait a minute, I live there now.
I think they said the third ward is last. Sorry, just kidding.
It's a ward of healthy people.
Another counselor that has a question. Counselor Segley, please.
Well, it's actually not a question. It was just a comment about the housing authority and their doses being given to younger people. I think that the issue has to do with the congregate living situation. So if everyone is vaccinated, then the place is safe. But if you only vaccinate 75 and older, you have quite a few people who are handicapped and who are living there. So the safest thing to do would be to vaccinate everyone. So I think that's why it was not done necessarily by age in that.
Yeah, I understand that, but my question was that the feds seem to do one thing, the state seems to be another. That's what I was getting at. It's like different programs with different segments of populations, and I don't know about the rest of the country, but it would seem that that's probably the same thing.
Right, but I think it's sort of like nursing homes. No matter what age you are, you're going to get it. So I just wanted to interject that. Thank you.
I don't think you can compare nursing homes with apartments.
Just wanted to follow up on that, Counselor. That's true from the federal level perspective, but the state didn't follow that. If you look at the group homes that we have for individuals with intellectual development disabilities who have comorbidities, it wasn't until 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't because of the providers and the trade organization that supports them and making issues out of it, that they got included in the mix, which is unconscionable. But the state did something one way, the feds did it somewhere else, and yet we had this population of, I'll say, about 1,400 folks, not counting the workers that are there, so probably 2,000 to 3,000 folks that were not even thought of, but they are now. So.
Thank you. I believe Councilor McCalla had another question, correct?
Yep. Just if anybody has any provided updates in regards to the bridge realignment, that would be wonderful.
The only thing I know, Councilwoman, is that it looks like, from speaking with DOT, and I'm not, into the woods with them, that whatever they're doing, they're about a year off from the design thing. I don't think that's going to happen until fiscal year 2023. So I'm not sure if the question is, is there anything else that can be done or changed or that sort of thing? But I do know that financially, they're about a year off from where they thought they would be at this particular time. But I don't have any other specific info other than that. So that gives us a little bit of time if something else needs to be adjusted. And I don't know that it can, but we still have that kind of time to work with.
Okay, the manager and then Councilor Leonard. Let's do the manager first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Gene. Just Angela, I've asked just last week, and I have a partial critical path document that I'm going to provide to the council. Needs some tweaking by DOT to try to give us so that the council has something in front of them that just shows the critical path of maybe the money trail as well as the construction, and the design and the construction. So hopefully I'll be able to provide it to you next week. I reached out to DOT just for that, and I know we're probably due for another update from DOT, and we've been trading a lot of information with their real estate people because of the impact on the portions of the city yard. So I'll be providing an update soon on all of that.
Thank you.
Can you provide that to us as well?
Of course, Lou, yes.
Councilor Leonard. Councilor Leonard.
Yeah, I have two questions about legislative bills and pertaining to schools. One, I was told by Joe Shikarki that had passed that school superintendents and principals could hire new staff without school committee approvals. So he verified, confirmed that that had passed at the state level. So my question is, how then can school committees and the city be held accountable? Let's say if a community or people in the school department decided to go hire a slew of people because the debt or the deficit has to be paid by the community. So this passed upstate, where's the checks and balances as to who's gonna be forced to pay it if in some communities it's a lot of hires?
Councilwoman, do you know the bill number on that?
Yeah.
Specifically so I can look that up.
Yeah.
If you talk to Joe, do you have it, Rep. Carson?
No, I don't have it. What I was going to say is I don't really remember it. We didn't pass too many bills last year because we
I
broke.
don't either. That's why I was asking.
Joe said it passed. He said very few people asked about it. It was either this past year or it may have passed during 2019. But he said, no, it's true. And I said, are you sure? Well, I'd appreciate if somebody could find out.
The other thing is, I can't see
Can I ask you? Can I ask
see that
you?
passing without the school board association going a little crazy on that, but I could be wrong.
I'd like to know about that.
Sure.
Councilor Leonard, can I ask you to provide Rep. Abney and the rest of our legislative delegation with the bill number?
I'll try to find it. I was told by several people and I was told that it was passed. All right. So my second question is.
Councilor Leonard, just before you continue, so it's great having two screens up and having a computer in front of me. I believe it was 2019. I just looked at the bills that came out of the Senate Education Committee, and there was a bill about, I'm looking at it and I'll verify it by the end of the hearing here. Education Accountability Act. If you recall, in 2019, there were 2 to 3, Senator Royer, Chairman and Rep. Carson, there were few bills with regards to enhancing school accountability and local oversight control and a couple other things. One of the ones I think was associated with that, I can send the bill out later from if this is in fact the one, but it may not be, but it would have been the 2019 timeframe was when several of those bills came forward, and it sort of was a package of 3 that made it out of the General Assembly in 2019. But I'll let you know what it is and I'll send it.
Yeah, that'd be great, because a couple of members of the school committee asked me and said, hey, we can't fund these. Who's gonna pay for it?
Yeah.
All right, so
Right.
that's my first question. My second question is there a Senate bill presently being brought up in regards to charter schools, trying to discourage or eliminate charter schools?
The short answer is yes. We heard the bill in committee. It was a 4-hour hearing 2 weeks ago. The bill passed the Senate this week, and the bill does two things. It puts a moratorium on charter schools for 3 years. So I think through 24. I'd have to go back and look. I'll send you that bill as well. The other thing it does as well is approvals. So anything subsequent to July of 2020 would be placed in a moratorium. So obviously there's a lot of consternation with regards to those applicants who were given approval in 2020, they would be included in that as well. So
I just think that a lot of parents question that. And I understand the purpose, not to take funds and not to take students out of the public school realm. But at the same time, we all could see the numbers and the test scores of schools throughout Rhode Island and the country. It's not just us. And I just think, as a former educator for 25 years, that kids deserve the opportunity to go anywhere to get a good education. I don't understand and can say I'm familiar with the funding allocations for charter schools. I can't speak to that, but I just think that charter schools seem to have been successful in many of them in Providence. So I don't understand why that would be pushed by the state.
I would ask that the legislators get back directly, not only to Councilor Leonard, but also to apprise the other councilors of the outcome of this. I'm also going to ask that if you want to speak, please raise your hand. It'd be much easier to keep the decorum. The other thing I have to mention, there are some people that are listening to this meeting. This is a meeting of the council and the legislators, so we won't be taking calls from the public. This is for our information and to keep everything within a certain time frame. So thank you. Councilor Gova.
Thank you. And, part of what I was going to ask is, when, if we're going to bring up questions like with specific bills and stuff, it would be really helpful for the conversation if we could get those ahead of the meeting, because it's hard for anyone to really weigh in or ask questions if we don't really know the substance of what those bills are. But that was more of a comment than a question. But what I did want to ask is, Joe and some of the legislators brought up some of the discussion around the stimulus and the way that's going to impact the state budget and the municipal budgets. And I know that, the state is looking to fill some of the gaps with the stimulus. My question is more of, is there anything being looked at or any work being done at the state level that's looking at ways to fill those gaps and kind of recover and protect the state in the long term, beyond just using the stimulus to fund it? What type of longer term recovery efforts are being looked at from the state level? And then I also had a question about REMA and if there's any reimbursement from REMA for municipal COVID spending. So those are my two big questions in terms of the budget.
Let me take a crack at that first, Marvin, and then I'm going to give it to you.
That's okay, go ahead.
The new Speaker of the House has said that everything's on the table, which includes cuts and increases in taxes. So I'm sure Marvin has had more discussions on that than I have, but we may need to look at a variety of things.
Okay.
Well, that's absolutely true, and I said that in my opening comments, is that but for some of the one-time spending money that we get coming in If we didn't have that come in, we would and then want to do all of the things that we want to do. And, trust us, we get, I don't want to say thousands, but we certainly get hundreds of bills asking for something to happen in the state that would end up costing money. So, but for having the ability to use some of the COVID money to make sure we have our funds available, you would have to either raise some taxes, you would have to not do some certain things, you would have to delay some certain things. So it's no different than what you would have to do in your own home budget or your own municipal budget. So yeah, we think about all of those things. But honestly, right now, most of the traffic and bills we get are people asking for something. People are having a hard time, and nobody wants their taxes raised. I don't want to raise anybody's taxes personally. I don't want my own tax being raised. But I do know that if we have to go through with some of the educational things we want to, that all of those things, as Rep. Carson said, is on the table to be looked at. But that's a long process. So it's one of those things I wouldn't sweat it right now, but there are no other ways of doing it. Rhode Island, historically, over a period of time since we got the tobacco settlement money, before I even got here, we've been using one-time money to pay for things. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do if you need it, but what it tells me is that our state priorities, which connects to our city priorities, are not where they ought to be. But we have to have a balanced budget at the end of the year. So, Councilor Bova, yeah, it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, we may have to look at doing some things we don't want to, if we want to keep those things that we all say we need. So it's an ongoing process. It's nothing is settled yet, but that is an option. That's the best I can give you on that, unless Lou or Don has something different. I don't know how you plug a hole unless you just don't do some things or you raise taxes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
None of which are good ideas, so. Yeah.
Councilor Bova, any other questions at this time?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the question of REMA. So I know that FEMA reimburses 75% of the municipal COVID spending. And I know that, there's work done in coordination with REMA in terms of getting that information to FEMA and working through that reimbursement process. But is there any chance or anything of REMA aiding and giving reimbursements to the municipalities as well?
I don't know is the short answer. I do know we're asking for the ability to have different government organizations go right directly to cities and towns. Right now they generally don't in all cases, but I'll look into that to see what we can do for here, but I just don't know the answer to can we have them do that at this point, unless Lou or Don or Lauren knows something I don't know in that regard.
Yes, Lou DePalma, please.
Yes, very quick. Uncertain about that with regards to, I think REMA is looking to figure out across the board how they continue to work with municipalities, but I think it's an unanswered question. The new stimulus that we hope was coming, I think we can believe it's coming here sooner than later. At what number, we don't know. We'll have to find out, but I stand corrected. I get miscommunicated earlier with regards to the charter school bill, Councilor Leonard, and I'm sending this to everybody in a little bit here. The Education Committee in the Senate voted on it. It's coming before the full Senate on Tuesday. I apologize, I'm getting my days mixed up with what's happening. But the charter school bill is coming before the full Senate on Tuesday. So,
All right.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Holder, please. I believe you had some questions.
Yes, how are you doing today? So I have two items that are on the agenda, but before I get to those, I just wanted to bring something up to the reps about, not necessarily about the vaccinations, but with just the whole COVID plan with the state. My basic question is, do you see at some point the state allowing each municipality to basically kind of govern themselves and how how they go about doing restrictions, especially from a hospitality standpoint, because it's been very frustrating for a lot of businesses, and I shouldn't say hospitality, a lot of small businesses. It's been very frustrating because it seems like Newport specifically is getting blanketed with all the restrictions from the rest of the state, and those cities that aren't doing I don't want to say they're not doing a great job of battling their COVID numbers, but when you have high numbers in this, bigger cities, more populated areas, and those numbers are bringing the state numbers up. Now the state comes out and just blankets all the restrictions on everyone in the state. But however, when you turn around and say vaccination shots are being distributed by the percentages of who has the higher numbers in the state, now because we're doing well in Newport with low numbers, we get a low amount of vaccination shots. Whereas it seems to me it should be everyone should get an equal amount of the vaccination shots.
Yeah.
So do you see at any point where we could be able to have, just different cities and municipalities kind of govern themselves?
Well, personally,
I think that the Department of Health has to have a hand on all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I don't think that the municipalities have the capacity to do that kind of technical work that needs to be done with respects to the oversight of the restrictions, managing the data with respects to how many cases there are, the vaccine distribution, as as unhappy as we are with it, they are working on it. Unless my colleagues have something different to say, I don't see the Department of Health giving that up.
Yeah, no, I should have been a little bit more clear. I don't mean like just we're going to not listen to the Department of Health. Obviously, we would work with all the different state departments as well.
Here's what I agree on, or I think, and I hear what you're saying. But the real question, do I think that the state government, the executive branch, is going to allow that to, to come down to the municipal levels? I don't think so at this point, mostly because they're in a crisis mode of trying to make sure that this thing is brought under control. Here's what I do think, though, is that as we get more people vaccinated, and this is just my personal opinion, no official stuff from here for that, but the more we get people vaccinated, the numbers, come down and they become really manageable. That there is a chance that then the state, as they say, would be able to say, all right, Newport seems to have their numbers under control. They're way down. It looks like the businesses understand, what happens. Because you got to remember, here in Newport, we have people coming in and out who are just not from here. So I think as the numbers get under control, there's a possibility of that conversation. But without that, I just don't think so, because they're battling. Remember, the real issue is that keeping people out of the hospitals and keeping people from dying. When you get away from that, obviously we have small businesses who have been just devastated by this stuff. But those two things is what driving the federal government too, but certainly state governments, is keeping people out of hospitals, keeping people from dying. When those numbers come down enough that, every restaurant manager or every hospitality understands what they need to do to keep those numbers down, maybe that kind of conversation would fall on better ears than they are right now. But that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. DePalma. Sorry.
Very quickly, Charles, good question you bring up. Just a slight correction with regards to the percentages given of vaccines given to various municipalities. They've been pretty consistent on the categories. There have been some special categories, though, that have been set up with regards to the high infection rate, clearly in the city of Central Falls and Pawtucket. We've seen it, we've heard that and seen that, and where they're looking to do mass vaccinations there. But everything else with regards to, we can't emphatically say this, but we believe it's true. The criteria being used is consistent across the rest of the 37 cities and towns, with the exception of I think it's to Pawtucket and Central Falls, because of the high infection rate that they've seen there. Chairman's exactly right with regards to, if at the end of the day, you address the folks most impacted by that, to keep them out of the hospitals, to keep them from dying, that's job one. Then we got everybody else. With regards to small business, I I think it's going to go back to facts and data. It's going to be based on the science. The one thing you will know, like I said, from working with Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee over the last 9-10 months on the small business stuff, on a call with him every week with the Small Business Coalition and on Tuesdays as well. He's fixated on that, wants to ensure, and he always says, think positive, test negative, but clearly from a small business perspective, ensuring that small businesses are our lifeblood. How do we ensure we're consistent? And then also consistency, sometimes we have to look at with other states, because we do sometimes things in Rhode Island that Massachusetts doesn't, and you look at it and say, there's only one set of science. There's not two sets of science out there. So.
Okay. Councillor Holder, can I ask you to ask your other questions, please?
Yeah, so just kind of changing gears a little bit. I want to talk about the minimum wage increase that's been both at the state level and the federal level, looking to go up to the $15 an hour range. My concern with that is the getting rid of the tip credit. So I want to see if any of your representatives are have any concerns about that, or are you just looking to just go across the board, do just a straight $15 minimum wage, knowing with a lot of the research done nationally that it could cost a lot of jobs for people that, you know, if they do get that $15 an hour at a minimum wage, that it's going to really affect the small businesses trying to pay them.
No, I agree with you that there are parts of this that I think as a legislature, we're going to really have to take a look at, and particularly the tip part that you're talking about. You know, going up to $15 an hour at the federal level is really what's happening now. At the local level, I think, because I know we're going to have some bills in the House. I'm pretty sure that Don and Lou are going to get some in the Senate also. I always wait until I can see what's in the bill instead of saying, oh, I just don't like $15 an hour, because there may be ways that you can accomplish, you know, people at a certain level getting more money without that. But we do have to have a full and open discussion, particularly about tips and things of that sort. So I'm with you there in terms of looking at it, but I don't make a decision on the bill until I've waited to see what happens. And this is what I would say, and I think my other three colleagues would say, you know, when you have, because it's a good idea that you just said, when you have that, you got to show up and either testify or write us a letter so we will know that here's something else we can add into this. And then numbers sometimes change. But yeah, there's a big wave of let's do $15 an hour. You know, some cities around the country, a few do it now on their own. So we have to be very careful here because of the industry that we're in. And I would not want to see organizations that actually do very good at supporting people who work and work hard, you know, in their tip factors and things get punished by this, trying to get to what people will say is a living wage. But my suggestion is that as we get the bill and start looking through it, that you testify, let us know. 3 or 4 or 5 people can make a difference sometime, but that's just my perspective.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, Senator De Palma, please.
Just a follow up on that, Charles. The Senate Labor Committee, you may have seen it in the news, passed the bill this week. It'll come before the full Senate also on the 9th. 9th's going to be a long day for Senator Royer and I suspect. But it looks to do, and I want to tie in our neighboring cities and neighboring states, because that's a part of this factor as well. Also, what I think we're hearing from President Biden as well with regards to some relaxation and saying, instead of just getting there, get there over time. So what the bill that passed the Senate seeks to do over the next 4 years, October 1st of every year, right now, minimum wage is $11.50. This coming October 1st, if this bill passes and the governor signs it, just using this as an example, not to say that the House will do something what they're going to do and we'll figure out what happens from there, or if anything, it would go to $12.25. So a 75-cent increase in December. And it moves itself for 4 years out to October 1st of 2024, and that's when it gets to $15. The Senate President, the Senate Majority Leader, when we convened last year and the beginning this year, indicate that this was a priority to work towards getting a living wage. Let's break on that. The other piece, we look at our neighboring states, and if we look at Massachusetts, the majority of the folks in Rhode Island live within minutes of the Massachusetts border. Minutes, and probably small numbers of miles, maybe tens of minutes, but maybe tens of miles to do that. So we're not unique in this. Somebody said, well, we don't have to join what everyone else is doing, but in looking at where we are and what we need to be looking at things from a living wage perspective, this is a step in that direction. But as the chairman indicates, input is critical, and we'll see where we go from there. But the full Senate will see this on Tuesday at 4 o'clock.
Thank you. I know you have another question, Councilor Holder. There are two councilors that have their hands raised. Is it in regard to the current discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Bova.
Thank you. I wanted to, keep the conversation going on the $15 minimum wage because I guess, Lou, I want to make sure I understand what you were saying in that the bill that's in front of the Senate that's been going forward, that's the one that would increase it incrementally. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's
Yes.
only been passed at committee, not by the full Senate?
Correct. It goes to the full Senate on Tuesday, correct?
Okay, and is there, is there a equivalent bill on the House side is my first question.
There have been $15 an hour wage bills on the House side. One of my colleagues has introduced it every year. I don't know if it's the exact same bill. Just as a short FYI, we sit like miles apart from each other, so I don't always know what my colleagues in row 35 are doing when I'm sitting alone in row 1. So take into account that we have to wait and read the bills. We're not having that close contact and talking quite as much as we would have in the chamber. But I know that some of my colleagues are reintroducing it. I'm sure of that.
Thank you. Would you be able to, and you might have said this already, Rep. DePalma, I apologize, but would you be able to send that bill to the council? Because I'm very interested in it. The question of passing a living wage is really important. And, as I think Rep. Abney said, it's really important that we get the substance of the bills. So if we'd be able to get the bills from the Senate and the House side sent to the council, that would be really helpful.
So Councilor Bova, you couldn't have had any better timing. I was about to hit send on the 2 previous bills. I'm just going to cut and paste the link to this, put it in that. It'll be in your inboxes in 30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Leonard.
Thank you. Thanks, Lou, for doing that too. I think it's important to look at the entire bill too. I also think, like Charlie Holder, that we have to look at all the substantive parts of the bill, because if not done correctly, or if not sustainable, then it could lead to a lot of unemployment. So I think we need to look at everything in the bill, and hopefully that the state, and I think with our group, it will be looked at carefully, because I don't want to see something come out of it that is more regressive than progressive in helping people.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Holder, your next question.
Well, just want to touch on the minimum wage, and it's not necessarily, I'm not coming out, I don't want people to think I'm coming out saying, the wage should not be raised, the minimum wage should not be raised by any means. But mostly to the point that, again, the tax credit or the tip credit is the important part of that. Because it's great for hourly people, to be able to get a raise, to get up to a living wage. But then there's especially in Newport, there's a large group of people that would make more than, with tips, would make more than the $15 an hour, and that they face a realistic reality of not making what they're used to making, because they're going to get, basically they're going to take a pay cut because restaurants in general will not be able to afford to pay, a server or bartender $15 an hour, plus have them make, whatever tips that they make, because then you have to take into consideration there's unemployment insurance, there's workers' comp insurance, there's FICA, there's a lot that goes into, just, putting a raise in everyone's wages. So that's why I just want to end that right there. My other questions to bring up is about short-term rentals, Airbnbs, to the state level. Is there any chance that we're going to be able to get some sort of resolution in, finding out, where our taxes are coming from those third-party reservation systems, especially in Newport? It just seems like we're not getting, the money that should be coming to us. We don't know what Airbnbs, Verbo, what have you, what houses are getting that money, and are we getting enough of that back into our city?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually wanted to know from the council exactly what they need us to do on Airbnbs at the state level. I have worked on it. The past year, nothing's happened. I've sort of lost track of it a little bit, but previous years I had worked on it. And we are introducing our registration bill again, which will require registration on the websites themselves. I think Senator Oyer's putting it in, and Senator Palmer, and I just called to have it written now. As far as the taxes go, my memory serves me correctly, I did hound the Department of Taxation to try to understand where the taxes were coming from. And in most cases, since the third party, the application or the organization that set the third party, the people that make the reservations, I forgot what it's called, they're paying the tax. So because when a room is rented through most of the apps, not all of them, when the room is rented, the customer pays the app, the third party vendor, and then the taxes go, they collect the tax. So they become the taxpayer. So as a result, we have like Airbnb paying the taxes for all the properties that they have in the state of Rhode Island. And that varies by application, but the Department of Taxation is very, very tight-lipped about that information. They consider that information really private information under federal law. And they would not give me anything when I asked them for any kind of information about how this works at all. They wouldn't even tell me the organizations that were collecting money on the behalf of the local properties. I mean, they just really are tight-lipped, and it was very frustrating for me. But that was where I left that issue about 2 years ago, unless other members on the call know more about this. But as long as the third-party vendor is paying that tax, then that's their private tax information and is protected under federal law.
Rep. Carson, I think the question is, if we don't know what properties are renting, you get one check from Airbnb. We don't know the name, we know the number of rooms. We don't even know if it's the correct amount.
Right, I agree with you. I agree with you.
How coveted could the department or the tax people be with that information? They're operating as a commercial entity, and that's, I think, the rub for most of the residents in Newport. I understand where you're coming from, and I know.
I agree with you, and I'll tell you, I've gone head to head with taxation more than once on this, and I've complained to the governor about this because they just say, we are not telling you this information. I mean, one way is to disallow the third party from collecting the tax and forcing those local properties to pay the tax themselves. That is one way to do that. I don't know how that would work. It's just a sort of an idea off the top of my head. But if we created some system where the properties themselves had to pay the taxes, the third party could not collect it on their behalf and pay it, then they would be paying Newport, and you would know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
That would solve the problem here. It wouldn't solve the problem for other municipalities because their money goes directly to the state and the taxation won't tell us. But Newport's problem would be solved. I mean, that's something to think. I would definitely entertain a meeting with the mayor and Councilor Holder on this, offline if you want to discuss this more. Absolutely.
Thank you. Councilor Bova?
Thank you. I mean, when I know Rep. Carson, you mentioned, wanting to hear what we think we need, in Newport, and for you to introduce at the state level. And I was glad to hear that the registration bill is going forward again. But something that I think that we're probably scheduled to talk about later on is the potential amendment to our local tax classification that would allow us to tax short-term rentals at a commercial rate. That conversation has happened more than once at the council, and I was actually just talking to the city manager about it recently as well. That having the ability to tax short-term rentals as commercial entities would be hugely beneficial, especially, I think that we would be looking at, we have, homes that are owned by out-of-state owners. No one ever lives in them. They're only ever used as short-term rentals. And I think we all feel that that's a commercial entity. And so we would like to be able to tax that as a commercial entity. So that being able to get that done would be very helpful.
Senator Oyer and then Councilwoman Leonard.
Thanks. I just wanted to give Rep. Carson a ton of credit on the work that she's done on the state level around this issue. I think the registration bill is a really critical component. The way that I understand, what you all do on a city level, and I don't know if Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you have a vendor that tries to, you guys have set up a licensing structure as well, and you have a vendor that tries to, kind of help clean up the pieces. So my feeling is that that it's critically important for us to have a state level registry, because that will help you all do the work that you're doing on the municipal level. So this is a huge priority of mine as well. And I know how important it is to the city, because, we're in a housing crisis, and I have seen the homes that are getting flipped over to, all of a sudden, there's a shortage of housing stock because people are purchasing second homes. And, I've heard from so many people who are looking at purchasing a home, and they're competing with people from Massachusetts and New York, and now the prices are skyrocketing. But somebody who has lived here their whole life, or their kids want to be able to stay here, aren't able to do it. So I think getting this under control so that we're, able to address the housing issues is also a really important aspect of it. So
thank you. Councilor Leonard.
One of the things people don't seem to be talking about so much is you can require registration for short-term rentals, but that doesn't mean people are going to register, because my ward is the most impacted.
My bill requires that the property register. It gives the organization like Airbnb 6 months to notify their properties that they have to register. And if they don't register, they have to take them off the site.
Now, I understand that for Airbnb, because, and quite frankly, I don't understand how the Division of Taxation can tell the legislature we're not doing something.
Yeah, well, that's another story, but she's
another story, but
I'll leave it at that.
Going back to the registration and so the biggest penalty is we can take it off that Airbnb site, but there are lots of host sites. And then when it comes to a different taxation rate that Jamie Bova was talking about, how are you going to, what kind of proof could possibly be required to say that the person's actually living there other than their IRS tax return? I mean, let's face it, a lot of people don't register. A lot of people, there's very little teeth. We go into court. I can ask the city manager, but I doubt that more than 5 places in Newport in the past year have ever been taken to court for illegally doing short-term rentals. There's just seems to be no teeth to it. So without requiring a Rhode Island tax return or something with numbers crossed out, and even that, out-of-state people still have to sometimes do a Rhode Island tax return for properties, so, because they own other properties. I don't see how that is gonna hold up. I really don't. I just think sounds good, but without teeth to it, without proof, and that would be tax returns. I don't see how it works. I mean, I can
Okay.
tell you, I get calls all summer long on that.
All right, we have to get through this agenda, so I would ask that if you have any other comments on this from the legislators, I know, okay, Mr. Yeah, go ahead.
Very quickly, Middletown's is experiencing the same thing. They're working to address the same thing.
Yeah, they are.
Later this afternoon. One of these they're looking at, I want to go back to Councilor Bova's comment earlier about the tax rate, but Middletown's looking at potentially hire somebody, and that would be their job. I think it would be paid for by ensuring that. They're also setting up for people to notify the town anonymously if they're seeing it. Something needs to be done, right? What's been done to date is not working. The second piece, though, with regards to the tax rate, and I would defer back to the city manager or the city solicitor, Chris. I know my time on the council of Middletown, I'm not certain you're restricted from creating another category of tax rate. Maybe you are, but I have to go back and look at that. But I'm sure I can always speak for myself. I'd be willing to entertain anything Newport's looking to do to try and address the issue. So Joe or Chris, is that a step? Is that a restriction you can't?
Well,
I know you don't need to get approval.
I'm going to answer it, Lou. I'm going to answer it. The answer is, without state legislation, we can't create another tax classification category separate from what we already specifically have. And in fact, ours is restricted. We don't even have the ability to take advantage of the general authority under state law because of how strict our classification categories are. I might add, just anecdotally, we do have someone on payroll that specifically tracks short-term rentals. I also want to add that I have some statistics in front of me that we have over 400 properties that are registered as short-term rentals, which obviously, with quite frankly, 256 of those 400, approximately 400, pay at the residential rate of taxation. The balance obviously pays at the commercial rate. You can also, within the category of short-term rentals and changing the tax classification scheme, there's a lot of subsets of consideration that go along with considering changing the scheme. And this one subset that I know the council will, at some time, if this comes up as a resolution, have a good discussion on, and that is owner-occupied, and I'll underscore that again, owner-occupied short-term rentals, as opposed to short-term rentals that might have a manager that represent that they have a manager on site when the property's rented. We don't have a distinction that we make owner-occupied versus on-site manager during rentals, and we probably should, because there are quite a few properties out of those 400 that have checked the box on our own registration form that indicates they have someone on premises during the rental period. And if you culled all those out, it would be a very small number, quite frankly, because I counted them yesterday. Out of the 400, we would have a very limited number that are non-owner occupied or non-resident manager or having someone on site. So I think that if we go forward, I think the distinction the council will have to make or may make is short-term rentals owner occupied by versus anything else. If you take the whole category and simply were able to change the tax classification scheme and make them all flow into the commercial sector, if you will, it would be significant. It would have a significant impact for the city of Newport.
Thank you.
This week alone on Airbnb, there were 600 properties in Newport listed for rent.
There you go.
That's just
I'm
one.
sure.
That's just,
One host site.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I would hope you'd look into this further. We're going to move this along at this point because we do have a number of other issues to discuss.
I wanted to talk about something on the agenda because we're switching around here.
Yes, Catherine, go ahead.
All right. We have on the agenda March 2nd bond ballot referendum. And we haven't brought that up yet, even though we brought things lower on the agenda. So my question to the state legislators is, how many of these bond issues are tied to matching funds? And if so, how much? Because it seems to me that there won't be that many people voting on March 2nd. I think it should have been part of the general election if it could have been there, because usually during a special election, only special interest groups come out to vote. So first of all, how many of these are tied to matching funds that we would get if they passed? And second of all, it talks about a $400 million bond referendum, but how much more would there be for interest that the residents of Rhode Island would have to pay for the complete bond issue?
Well, Kate, I think right off of the bat, I mean, you asked some specific questions and I don't want to guess on those. I can get that information back to you, but generally, if the bonds have something to do with like transportation, with a federal match or something of that sort, my analysts do know how much that potentially is. I don't sit right here at my table, but some of them probably do, but I can get that information back to you rather than guessing on the number of them, because I don't remember if it's 8 or 9 or 10 that was left. So I just want to make sure that when I answer your question, I can be specific on
that. Because there's a bigger incentive to vote yes if there's matching funds tied to it. Otherwise, it's okay, the state is going to pay 100%. And the other thing is, nobody seems to mention how much it's going to cost to carry the load of $400 million bond issue.
Well, to your final point, that's always a gentle argument whenever we look at these things, because you're right. Every time you borrow money, at some point in time, you have to pay it back. The the discussion we get mostly is that if you don't bond as we do, and we do a bunch of bonding, not as much as, I would like for us not to do a lot, but then I'm more of a fiscal moderate than I am anything else. But I do think, and I remember in a lot of our discussion that some of these, I'd have to see which ones they were, that if we did not do them now, it would cost us more in our general revenues in the future. But that's the reason we do that. So, the argument you make is what we hear all of the time. I think it's valid, but we don't win every vote on that. But I can get the specifics back to you about, the exact number of bonds, and then the question of what the interest would cost, but I don't know that right off my head at this point.
Because I think there's a difference between what we wish for and what we need. And I saw $172 million for those universities, which is a big hunk of change. And I think people would say, and they are saying, how much of that is job enhancement for the future, giving students a chance for a better life? And how much is it for bricks and mortar?
I just want to make one other comment, so that, because it's a good discussion. One of the discussions we had was exactly what you're saying. Many times the bonds come to us in a big package. They just need, $1 billion for argument's sake. Never that much, but for argument's sake. But inside of that are a lot of little things that you don't see. I don't want to say they're hidden, but you wouldn't know that they were there. So even this time around, this time around, one of the reasons we did it this way is we felt that citizens who were voting on these bonds should know that if it's a $100 million bond, but 75 million goes to URI or whatever it is, you know. So you're posing this very questions, and I'm glad to hear that we thought about when we put them forward, so that a person would know what they were actually voting on with these bonds. So I think we made the right decision to break them up, which is why we have so many right now. But each specific one, I'd need to take a look at and see what the cost
Was
of
there, was there a reason that we didn't do it for the general election?
There is, I was going to speak to that. There
Yeah.
was too much uncertainty at that time in September and October as to what the federal monies would be. And there was a hesitancy on the part of both, on all the leadership in the state, the treasurer, as well as the House and Senate, that they didn't want to take on new debt at that time, not knowing exactly what our budget would look like under the COVID restrictions and complications. So once we got through the budget process in December, there was much more confidence that were really zeroing out some of our existing debt, and we have the capacity to take on some new debt, and interest rates are the lowest they've probably been in a generation. So, and there was still a commitment to those projects on the part of the executive as well as the legislative branches. So that's why we went.
Still in flux for terms of revenues and deficit and all that.
I mean, am I right about that, Marv? That's what my
No,
understanding.
you're absolutely right, and we're going to get into a computer loop circle here, because you're right about both of you are right. You know, we did take everything that Rep. Carson said into consideration. All of us did, in terms of when to put these bonds out there. But it is true that once they were out there, we know better. We knew better after December than we did before. So that was a method to the madness. It's not as clear as it probably could be, but you got to remember we were in the middle of COVID, and meeting and getting all the input on these bonds from both chambers of the House and the executive branch was not an easy thing to do, because everybody's priority was important to them. But that's one of the big reasons that we split them up, Kate. But I just want to get, and I'm not going to be able to convince you one way or the other, but what I want to do is get you the specific information on the number of bonds and
I'm glad you
get that
split them
back
up.
out to you.
I'm really glad you split them up. I think that that's more transparency, and I think that people understand that. I mean, if you didn't split them up, I think we'd hear much more squeaking and hollering.
I know.
Kate, I believe you have another question. Could you, because we would like to be able to wrap this up by noontime.
I'm done. I'm not sorry.
Okay. Well, great. Yes.
Just real quick, going back to.
Oh, marijuana discussion was on a bill, on our agenda.
Let's go to that. Let's go to that topic.
Okay. It can. All right. This is going to be my question. And it's going to be probably in two parts. Do you see recreational marijuana being legalized this year? And the reason I ask the question is because in the last couple years, I have one of my sons who owns a restaurant up in Tiverton, and I go up there frequently. And I was passing a particular building, which I had no idea what it was, on Adamsville Road. And it was really unbelievable. The lines, the cars. And one day I had said, and I thought it was another type of building. And he started laughing. He goes, no, that's the dispensary. I was absolutely stunned with that. As a matter of fact, I'm just wondering, will there be any additional monies paid to individual communities to maybe take care of some of the expenses that may be related to this? And, is there any kind of, everything I've looked at in terms of this bill, there's no additional money to host community. And I just really am surprised, and I'm wondering why. Anybody want to take the question? Senator DePalma.
The Senate President made I'll leave my opinion aside for a second. The Senate President, as earlier indicated when we started, that, and the Majority Leader as well, that it was going to be looked at this year more in earnest than it had in the past. So the Majority Leader, McCaffrey, and Senator Miller, Chair of Health and Human Services, who has been an ardent supporter of the legalization of the recreational marijuana for years, if not decades. We're getting together to try and look at key issues across, should that happen, how they've been addressed in other states, to try and put, if Rhode Island's going to do this, this would be a recommendation way forward. Break on that. So there's some effort underway and some things being thought about now that myself and Senator Royer received some thoughts for us to be thinking about, to be able to share information back to them. It's a work in progress, so that's there. Break on that. With regards to your comment, I can always speak in general terms as it relates to municipalities, because Middletown's doing the exact same thing, Tiverton and Little Compton as well. But the legislation that had been proposed in the past, so we can't say what the future is going to look like, but the legislation that had been proposed in the past had said, should a municipality have a place that sells recreational marijuana, there'd be some share of state funds that would go to them. Everybody would get some, but I think if I recall correctly, the bill last year from the governor had that in there. I think the year before it had something like that in there as well. So don't know what Governor McKee is going to do or come forward with, but I think leaders at the General Assembly have articulated an inclination. I said, I'll leave my opinion aside, to move down that path. And you're in the agenda with regards to being able to zone it in, zone it out, do whatever, and timelines for that. I always say to folks, we'll take your input and figure out how to factor that in. But I would say, don't wait for any input from anybody. Do what you need to do. I think in the case of Middletown's doing what they're doing, other cities and towns are doing what they're doing with regards to zoning it somewhere or not having it at all or whatever is possible. So that's we can't speak about what any budget bill will have because it's budget related from a monetary perspective and how municipalities benefit if they have a place or don't have it. But clearly the case was, if the past bills were going to be an indication of the future, you'd have monetary support to all the 39 cities and towns, whether you had it or not. Based on the equation, the chairman may have more insight there with regards to that equation that was there.
And I just very quickly want to explain the difference between what is now, which is medical marijuana has been approved for medicinal purposes. When you go to recreational, that means anyone. So that's why I was thinking in terms of the impact to the community. Senator Oyer?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think that it's a really good point you raise, and just not to repeat too much of what Lou said, but the reality is, yeah, the Senate is this is definitely listed as one of the priority areas that they're looking at for a whole slew of reasons. And I think that there's a lot of issues, like we're aware that this isn't just like a black and white, that we just, say legalize it and, skip down the road. There's a lot of nuance to consider. Some of the considerations have been, making sure that we're not creating a licensing structure that's just going to benefit, the wealthiest connected folks, that we're being equitable in making sure that small businesses have opportunities to participate in what is going to likely be a very strong emerging market. So I think that there's some transparency things that we need to think about, some, equity access issues that we need to think about. And I think there's some social justice issues that need to be considered about, folks who have historically been, put into the criminal justice system, for using marijuana that now we've decided is legal. And so I think that that's a huge issue that we have to tackle, and we need to be really thoughtful about how we're doing that. I will say that your concerns specifically about the municipal considerations are really well taken. I would love to have, an offline, like further conversation to make sure that I fully am understanding the scope of what you all are concerned about, so that we can fully represent your position as we're kind of trying to figure out where the pieces and how the balance all comes together. But I do think, like Lou said, I think this was an issue that was DOA in previous sessions, but do I think it's going to pass this year? I don't know, but I think that I will say that the conversation is definitely more serious than it has been in years past. So now is definitely the time to raise those concerns and make sure we're in close communication about it, for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Segley.
Hi, yes, just concerning the marijuana, we passed an ordinance to prohibit any kind of marijuana sales in Newport, and it will sunset in July. If the state does, though, come down with, areas for marijuana facilities, dispensaries, would the ordinance hold up, or would we have to abide by the state mandate?
Councillor,
Do you want me to try to answer?
Yes, please.
Sorry. I think it's a really good question, Councillor Segley, and I will tell you that the answer is that I don't know, but if you want to send me that legislation, and I can, as we're working through the details, I will help make sure that I'm taking a look at that and helping you all have some sort of expectation about if you would need to amend it or update it based on what we're doing. So,
thank you.
Councillor McCallum? I mean, not McCallum, sorry, Councillor Leonard.
Okay, I'd like to say, first of all, that we have very strong letters from the substance abuse group and from the Chamber of Commerce opposing the marijuana dispensaries in Newport. And I think that's really important. And I think it's a lot about this, and forgive my bluntness, but you all know me, about getting more tax dollars into the state. So I look at that in terms of, do we need a dispensary, and is it to feed tax dollars? And I can say that Newport's a destination city. And if we had recreational marijuana dispensaries, there's so many people that come to Newport as tourists, as guests. And if we're known as one of the cities, will come and you can smoke weed, and if you drive home, that's fine. I worry about public safety and people on the highways and the bridges. So I just look at it as, is it something that the residents of Newport and the voters would want? This is a really big issue. Maybe it ought to go on the ballot.
Well, I think that so many other states have already legalized recreational marijuana that as we debate this legalization question, there's a lot of evidence from other states. So I'm pretty confident that's one of the reasons we waited, as a matter of fact, to see what would happen in other states. So we can get our hands on some of that information about safety, which of course has got to be a top priority. There's no doubt about that. But I always say to people, if you live in Tiverton, you can walk across the street to buy marijuana legally in Massachusetts. Literally, you don't even have to drive. You could just cross the street. And so if we think that keeping it illegal here is stopping people from buying it across the street, then we really have to reevaluate our thinking about how we work as a region. I mean, I even understand that Connecticut is looking at legalization. And so the people that live over in Situate could walk across the street, so it is coming to some extent. And we have to debate how to do it, I think.
Councillor Holder, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just find it interesting on the state level where there's about 20,000 people that have medical marijuana cards, and you have 3 places in the whole state to get it. You know, so what do you expect to have? You know, that's why you have these long lines and traffic problems and things like that. You know, it'll almost be the same as having about 5 restaurants in Newport.
Maybe.
You know, we expanded it to 10 more, and there are applications currently being evaluated as to expanding that. There are some concerns about the money that's behind those applications and who exactly is investing and where the money's being put into the system and who's going to make the money. Those are concerns that I have. I know Senator Oyer has them. We have to make sure there's real equity there. Those are really good questions. We have few people getting real rich real fast, and that's not fair either.
Yes, Senator DePalma, please.
Yeah, very quickly, the legislation that passed a while ago allows 6 more dispensaries. So that's the language you would have seen probably at the end of last year, early part of this year. And it's going to be geographic. They want to get it geographically dispersed, all being handled by the, I think he's a new guy, Matt Santacroce. I think I just saw that yesterday or this morning, who used to work in the governor's office. I think he's become, I'm not sure if he's the marijuana or cannabis czar, but they got 40 or 50 applications for 6 more that the General Assembly, I think, authorized. I think it was 6 in the budget of 2019, Chairman, I think, or FY 2020, not the one we just did, the one we did
Right.
2 times ago. So that's being evaluated now. That's for the medicinal marijuana side and what happens there. So a lot of the things associated with that, with regards to the cultivators that are out there. Rhode Island has a horrible approach, and I've said it in committee, to the whole medical marijuana. We do not have a comprehensive plan. Every year from the administration, a new, I'll say, vector in space came out. Let's go that way. The next year, let's go this way. The next year, let's go that way. We need to get a handle on it. I think it had gotten a little bit out of control, and we had people create businesses because we said they could, and then we sort of cut them off at the knees with regards to what they do with it. So not a great way to do things, but that's on the medicinal side. Clearly, if recreational goes forward, those 2 things will be woven together, I think.
Okay.
I think so. My only comment is that I've got access, and so does anybody else, you know, who's a legislature, to what has happened in some other states. And several of the states have said, Marv, don't do it. You know, and then there are some others who said, well, yeah, it did help with the revenue. I think, though, we're going to have to bifurcate what we personally feel and what we need as a city, because if we make an approach of what we actually feel, you'll probably find that there are a lot of people in Newport itself who want, you know, recreational marijuana. So we have to be careful in approaching it, you know, that way. But I do think that there are some interesting questions about the cost, you know, to the city, and those things we can take a look at. But that's something I think that as counselors, you could help us with when we have to go to battle upstate for this. Because like I said, yes, it will bring in some revenue, and people are waiting like crazy to do it. And I have seen the Tiverton operation is right around the corner from where my daughter lives. And sometimes it's tough. And I can imagine, depending on where we put it here in Newport, if it happens, how many places coming off the bridge, all kinds of things I think would help us out more if we did not want to do this, rather than, I just don't like recreational marijuana, because I think that horse is kind of sort of out of the barn, and particularly on the House side. You know, we've got, I think, 14 or 15 new, new legislators, and I can't read them yet as to where they are. So if that thing was going to pass, it probably has a better chance this year than it did in the years before, as Lou was saying. So our approach, I think, has to be substantive in what it's doing for the city structure, rather than, I just don't like recreational marijuana, because
Thank you,
I
Marvin.
think we lose that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin.
You guys seem pretty happy. Has anybody been smoking this morning?
Yeah, right.
I certainly would like to thank the legislators for this morning. Is there any other issues, I'll ask the manager, that we want to discuss or want to address at this time?
I think, Gene, we had we talked about excuse me, the short-term rentals is another issue, but I think it's more of an issue that the council needs to debate first before we expose it.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Yes, Senator?
Just real quick, I know you had on the agenda, I'm not gonna go off the agenda. You know
Sure.
that the Middletown or Robert F. Wood Airport, as it's commonly put, or Newport
Mhm.
Airport in Middletown, is a issue that's front and center with me. Been trying to address it for probably, I don't know how many years now. And the issue for those unaware of the issue is about vegetative obstruction. And there are many now. I pushed back to RIAC. They had a plan 10 years ago about what they needed to look at from a vegetative obstruction to get to the 2 runways that are there. And the short of it is, one of the runways, because of vegetative obstruction or obstructions, will most likely need to be reduced by 500 feet. So both of the runways are less than 3,000. The 2,999 or less. Because if they were 3,000 or greater, you can have a bigger plane, but they're not. There's nothing to do with expansion of the runway, expansion of the airport. It's about maintaining safety of what's there. And there's a challenge with regards to property owners, private, town, state, et cetera, with regards to addressing those obstructions of the airport. It's not an easy issue. It's the same issue that's happening in spades, a multiplier exponentially down in westerly. So.
Yes, Councilor Leonard. Last
Okay, I
word.
had asked that that be put on the agenda, and I asked because I look at other small airports, Massachusetts, Florida, and I can tell you in Newport, I consider it economic development for the island. There are a lot of people now who have planes, and they're mostly business people, and they bring jobs and economic growth, and they come in and out of Newport through the Middletown Airport, and it really helps because they employ a lot of people. I can name them on my 2 hands. And I don't understand, honestly, if it's all about obstruction, why the state, for safety reasons, would not, either by eminent domain or something else, some process. And I even think that the private public partnership would pay to get that land and remove the obstruction so that airport can move along. And I can tell you that in a lot of small towns where businesses come in and business people, that there are rules and regulations, like in Naples, Florida, of what can come in, what year the planes are, to keep noise down, to keep it safe. So this is only Kate Leonard personally. I really think that there's something here about hopefully that airport will be closed and more traffic will go to Quonset. But I think it's not good for economics.
Okay, thank you. And you had the last word. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today and those that I know have been listening in from the public. I hope you understand that we've gone 2 hours now, and this is just with the council and the legislators. And it occurred to me during this time that perhaps sometime in the future, the legislators locally would like to take advantage of being in council chambers for a session like this with the public, because I think it's important that we get information out, that we discuss the issues at hand. Certainly, we've learned a lot today, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this
Thank
meeting
you.
is
Thank you
adjourned.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.